Hello, I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure. I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anything or anybody. I just like knives. And for, a little over a year now, you've been joining me, roughly once a week, on a little tour through my collection of small folding pocket knives. It's sort of a COVID shut-in project, and I've appreciated the company. Thanks. Today we're going to have a look at this interesting and a little unusual knife. This is a Fox Knives Ziggy, and I'll give a little background on where this came from. This is something a little unusual for me in that I bought this online without ever actually seeing one. It's one of those, about 3 years ago, I guess, one of those really creepy targeted ads, where it says, people who bought, this flavor of Kool-Aid often also like this, and it popped up this picture of the knife, and I did actually like the looks of it and said, oh, what the hell, and bought it, and it arrived. I like the looks, I like the description of the material, and it arrived. And it turns out, when it arrived, I was a little surprised. It was considerably larger than I expected. From the photos, I thought it was a much more compact knife. However, it is beautifully made with a great blade and a nice mechanism, and I've come to like it. It's too big to be one of my sort of so-called non-threatening gentleman's knives, but it's a good weekend size. In fact, it kind of made me realize maybe the non-threatening gentleman's knife category needs some refining, because, during the COVID shut-in, it's not like I'm going to an office filled with knife-nervous people anyway. I'm working from home most of the time. So anyway, as I say, when it arrived, it was a little larger than I expected, but I have come to like it formally. So this is a Fox Knives Ziggy, and this is the carbon fiber version. There are other scales available. The designer is Jens Anso, and my understanding is this has been made by other manufacturers before this one, but so this is the Fox model Ziggy. Mechanism, it's a side flipper, as you can see. It's running on bearings, very smooth. And this particular model, the Fox model, is a liner lock. You can see the liner lock there. Apparently there have been other lock models available, but I've not seen those. So we'll talk about size. As I said, the size kind of startled me a little bit when it first arrived. It's a little on the large end. Not huge, but large. So some measures, the most important measures in pocket calculators. As you can see, it's at 197 millimeters. It's a little over a pocket calculator. It's about 1.1 pocket calculators in length. And so let's compare it to things. My usual reference for a mid-size knife is the Mini Griptilian. Well, you can see it's much larger than the Mini Griptilian. So in the large-ish knives, there's a Benchmade 940. It's not obvious with the dramatically different blade shapes, but it's actually about 2 millimeters less than a 940 and about 4 millimeters less than a large Sebenza. So anyway, it's in the same size range as the large Sebenza, the Benchmade 940, and so on. So a small large knife or a large small knife, which, as I said, is not what I was expecting, but I have knives in that size. I do like it. Also, let's talk about the weight. It seems heavy. Now, it's 116 grams, which is not actually super heavy. That's less than the large Sebenza, which is 133 grams, so quite a bit less than the large Sebenza. More than the Mini Griptilian, of course. Turns out to be exactly the same weight as the Spyderco Tenacious. They have nothing in common, of course, but just as weight goes. So it's a mid-sized, mid-weight knife. The blade is beautiful. The blade, first of all, is 3¼ inches long. Being in a metric country, as is most of the world, why do I keep mentioning blade lengths in inches? Because there are places where 3 inches is magic number. So this is over the magic 3-inch limit, if that matters. The blade shape is interesting. Well, it's called a drop point, but it's a little unusual. We're going to come to that in a moment. It has a big choil. Lots of room for sharpening safely, and even lots of room to get your finger in there for choking up if you do that for fine work. I never do, by the way, but I know that there are people who like to cut that way. So, blade is interesting material. It's N690 steel, and this is my first and I think only blade of N690 steel. I didn't know much about it. A little reading. It's cobalt-enriched steel, fairly corrosion resistant, they say. The best summary I could find is that it's similar to VG10, but with slightly better edge retention. I can't say I think it's going to be easy to sharpen. I haven't tried to sharpen it yet, but it has stropped very nicely. Not as tough as some other steels, according to the things I've read. None of that matters for me. I mean, these are hobby knives. I carry them, I try to carry them on sort of regular rotation, so I'll probably be carrying this knife every 2 or 3 months. Who cares how tough the steel is, really? But I do like to know that it's good steel. So yeah, it is. The body is interesting. The body, I'll just close the blade. The body is carbon fiber scales on titanium, but the carbon fiber is deeply sculpted. See if you can, there you can see that. Sort of very deeply sculpted finger grooves, which is a very interesting texture. It's very light. The carbon fiber, is very light, and yet the blade is, the knife is still rather heavy, which would be because there's a lot of metal there. There is a wood-scaled version that I bet is also very nice, but anyway, this one is cool. Those deep sculptings certainly give an interesting feeling when you're holding it. We'll come to that in a second. Clip, there is a clip. It is bent sheet titanium. It's tip-up, right hand only. There is no facility to mount it on this side, and it's a shallow carry clip, as you can see there. It's also a very tight clip. We'll come back to that. There is a lanyard hole. I don't think, well, I don't know, maybe with a large-ish knife like this, a lanyard might make sense. Who knows? And for my left-handed friends, how about ambidextrousness, ambidextrositude? Well, of course, being a side flipper, opening is completely ambidextrous, and being a liner lock, closing is not. Closing for a left-handed person is probably rather awkward, and the clip is not left-handable, so I would say overall that, no, this is, except for opening it, this is really not a knife that is ambidextrous, and it would be awkward for left-handed people. Sorry. It's manufactured in Italy. It actually has the location on the blade somewhere. There we are. Maniago, Italy, which is sort of, from what I can tell, is sort of the knife or steel center of Italy. Quite a few manufacturers there. And overall, it's a nice piece. I like it. Let's talk about that a little more. I like the blade. I think the blade is a really beautiful shape. I did say that technically it's called a drop point, but it's kind of an unusual drop point. And here's what I mean about that. The definition drop point means that the top of the blade drops to meet the cutting surface. That's all that's required to be a drop point. But classic drop point blades, here's one. They usually have a straight section. The first part of the blade is straight. Then the blade starts to sweep up and it meets the dropping top of the blade. This knife has no straight section. The blade is curved along its entire length. So it's entirely belly, no straight section, which I think makes it look very graceful and, I don't know what word, organic. Is that it's nice. I like the curve, a completely different feeling than your traditional drop point with the long straight section first. Those look more like hunting knives. This is something different. It was very sharp out of the box, which is nice. The mechanism is very pleasant to use. There is a good amount of opening detent. There is some there. It isn't falling open by accident in my pocket, but it's not absurdly strong. It isn't difficult to get it moving. And there is a good lock. Nice satisfying clunk and a good lock. So the running on bearings really smooth. And we'll come back to this. Not especially noisy in opening. Okay. Not a loud blam opening sound like some flippers give. It's comfortable. I mentioned the deep contours in the carbon fiber. So what happens is when you hold it in your hand, those become finger grips. And so it's a remarkably secure feeling holding this knife. There's contours under each finger. I guess if you had a really unusual hand shape and size, that may not work that well. But for me, and I think for a lot of people, it ends up being very comfortable to hold. And another thing I like, very common with side flippers, is a safety feature, and that is that the flipper tab, which is now here, acts as a finger guard, stops you from accidentally rolling up on the blade, and acts as a thumb guard when you begin closing. That's what's contacting my thumb, reminding me to get my body parts out of the way because there's a blade coming. So I like that. So a lot of things I like about this knife. There are a few things I don't like about it. One, I think you've already seen several times, is it does tend to misfire. And I think, there we are. And that's because, well, first of all, this is a pretty heavy blade. There's a lot of blade inertia there. But there is no jimping of any kind on the flipper tab. It's just a polished, smooth, and rather slippery. So I do tend to slip off of it. Oh, there was a good fire there. I do tend to slip off of it, and the result being I don't get enough blade inertia going and have to flick the knife open the rest of the blade. A tiny bit of jimping would probably resolve that. A bigger problem is it's not easy to unlock. It's a liner lock, so you need to get your thumb in there and push that way. But there is no thumb relief cut here. So you have to kind of get your meat of your thumb pushed down in that way first and then move sideways. So it's a little bit awkward to get it moving. And for a left-handed person, I imagine it'd be quite awkward. A lot of knives cut a little bit of this side of the frame away so that you can attack the liner lock from the side more easily. This doesn't do that, so it's not as easy to close as I would like. The clip is a bit of a hot spot. That is quite a tip sticking up there. It's noticeable in the hand, not horrible, but noticeable. Worse though on the clip. The clip is very tight. I mean, it's tight anyway, that just is a tight clip. But it also has, I guess where you can see it, it has a scale screw under it. I don't know if I can get it where you can see that. Anyway, right under the end of the clip here is, there we are, is that scale screw. So there's one in there. So the clip, which is very tight, is also pushing down on a scale screw, and it's sitting in one of these deep sculpted grooves. And the result of all of that is that when this is on my pocket, first of all, it's not easy to get onto my pocket, and when it's on my pocket, it is definitely not easy to get off. It is difficult to slide in and out of pocket. Now the good news is it's very secure. It's not going to fall out of your pocket. But basically have to use two hands to get it onto my pocket. One hand to kind of pull the clip away a little bit, while the other one helps me guide it into the pocket. So I'd like it to be a little less of a struggle. The final thing I'll mention is that although the blade is very sharp, it isn't particularly symmetric. Now, again, I know you can't tell, but being a geek and a nerd, I always check. It's not particularly symmetric. It's about a 15 degrees on one side and 17 on the other at the places where it's best. And in some parts of the blade, it's 15 and 20, so it's quite asymmetric. That doesn't affect its ability to cut at all, but it will affect it when I sharpen it. The first time I sharpen this on my KME guided system, I'm going to have to deal with the fact that the blade isn't symmetric, and it's going to take some work to produce an equal bevel all along the blade on both sides. Anyway, those aren't horrible dislikes. They're minor things that I would have liked to be a little better. But let's go through my rating system, because I do like this knife. We'll do the NTGK rating first. NTGK for non-threatening gentleman's knife. And for NTGK, we'll do non-threatening first. So for non-threatening, the good news is an elegant blade shape. I just think that looks pretty and elegant, and it does not look like you're carrying a Crocodile Dundee hunting knife around in your pocket. Another nice thing about it, even though it is a side flipper, and normally I mark down side flippers for being scary. In fact, I'm going to mark this one down for being scary in a second. But because there is so much exposed blade here, even without a nail nick, you can open this knife two-handed. You can just grab the blade with the meat of your fingers And because the detent isn't horribly strong, you can easily open it two-handed. And so that's what I do. If I'm around non-knife people I don't want to scare, set off their switchblade alarms, just open it two-handed, and they never know that it's a flipper. So I like that. When you do flip it, another good thing is the flip is fairly slow because there's a lot of blade inertia there, so it doesn't fly open, and it's not especially loud. It's just a nice, elegant, smooth opening click. So that's less scary as flippers go. The bad news for being non-threatening is, first of all, it's big. It's big in all dimensions. It's long. It's also quite fat, so it's wide. There's a lot of stuff there. So it's a big knife, and those do tend to be a little more scary for people. Officially, it's a flipper only. And of course, flippers scare people because they think they're switchblades. But as I said, this one is on the friendly end as flippers go. And with these deeply contoured scales, it looks a little bit, tough. It looks like, that was designed to be firmly held in your combat gloved hands as a weapon. It's a little scary looking, and I would give it a B+ under non-threatening. Now, it's a gentleman's knife, GK. The good news is the carbon fiber sort of exotic scales, exotic materials are also always a nice thing. Made in Italy, ooh, it's made in Italy, like a Ferrari. That's a cool thing, exotic. I don't know if there's an Italian listening to this, you're probably thinking, it's a domestic knife, there's nothing exotic about that. But for the rest of the world, that's cool and exotic. The bad news is, first of all, the clip. The clip is conspicuous, it's bright, it's shallow carry, so there's a lot of knife, including this bright piece of metal sticking out of your pocket. And it's not pocket friendly. It's heavy, it's thick, and it's really hard to get on and off the material at the edge of a pocket, so definitely not pocket friendly. And I think with those deeply contoured scales, they're more of a worker looking shape than a pocket jewelry shape. It's not trying to be a gentleman's knife, so that's not intended to be criticism, but I'll give it a B. So overall, as an NTGK, non-threatening gentleman's knife, I'll score it as a B+. Now again, that's not what it is setting out to be. I don't mean that to be criticism. It's just not what it is. Next, let's look at the KN rating for what would my knife nerd friends. Well, the pros for knife nerds is it's comfy to hold. Those grooves make it really quite pleasant to hold. A pretty blade. I like that continuous curve blade. Good steel. Knife nerds will like all those things. The cons are the tendency to, of course, now it won't do it for me, but anyway, the tendency to misfire if you're not paying attention, which it will probably never do again now that I've said that. And that snaggy clip, the fact that it is so hard to get on and off of the pocket would not impress knife nerds who tried to put it in their pocket. I don't normally encourage my knife nerd friends to put my knives in their pockets, so that may not come up. But anyway, I'll give it an A as a knife nerd rating. And finally, the CMR, the cut myself rating, an easy A. I've never cut myself on it. And with the, there we are, there's the misfire I keep talking about. With the pleasant mechanism and the thumb guard action of the flipper tab, I probably won't cut myself on it unless I'm really stupid. So an easy A. So that brings us to a summary, which is, this was a blind date knife. I bought it based on a photo online, and I was a little surprised how big it turned out to be. I really should have paid more attention to the specifications. But I like it. It is a very comfortable, working weekend user knife. I probably need another rating for knives like that, but I'm almost at the end of my collection, and I'm not going to invent one now. It's a little big and heavy and scary for carrying to the office. It's really not a gentleman's knife, but it is comfortable and practical for a kind of a high-end weekend user. I like it quite a lot. Thanks for watching and following along. I'll see you again.